Let's start our dialogue on this very interesting topic, which is quite dear to our heart. Uh, this is some piece of heritage that we are losing day by day, and we need to put this in documentation, in writing, in our dialogue and discussions. So, uh, let me start a little introduction. Of course, Anita quite elaborately gave it. That was my CV and biodata. So basically, I'm an archaeologist, but I'm also somebody who is interested in gunpowder technology. I was quite interested in firearms since my childhood. So it could be a bad trait to pass it on to the next generation. If you're able to see some of the drawings done by my daughter, that is how she remembers her dad since her childhood. So there is a daddy in the middle looking at a cannonball. And again, our the childhood trips were full of memories where I had taken them to forts, and again you can see some children along with cannon. So that is perception of my own daughter about her dad and his work. So, well, besides cannons, mostly the projects I'm carrying out are mostly related to conservation of forts and other monuments with State Department of Archaeology. But it always intrigued me that we are losing each piece of history day by day. And as an archaeologist working in Archaeological Survey of India, practically I could do nothing in my initial phase. But I thought let's document them at least. Let's take the measurements, let's take the pictures, get them GPS tagged, and that is how some of my friends who thought alike, they joined me, and we started documenting these cannons on western coast of India. So we came up with our first work on the cannons of Goa, and it was essentially documentation, and there was very little correlation with history. But we thought before these cannons they disappear, at least we should document them. And second piece of our work came with cannons from western coast of Janjira, Revdanda, Chaul, Kolai, and then we also worked on cannons of Dev with a fellowship from Ponta Se Oriente. So that is how we started knowing these pieces. Why we need to study cannons? So first of all, mm, it's archaeological piece, and in archaeology we study any object which is created by the human beings and which gives at least little information about our own human past, and then we try to decode that object in order to reconstruct human behavior from the past. So usually we take a great interest, we take a lot of pain in digging out this objects from archaeological excavations. But surprisingly, these pieces of ordnance, they're lying on forts right in front of us, right on surface, but no archaeologist actually was bothered to document them in order to create some archaeological record in order to interpret human past. So first of all we need to understand our object, and this object is nothing but a cylinder which is sealed from one end and open from another end. So the open end is always called as muzzle, and the seal end is called as breech. So this is a classic muzzle loading gun, which was always loaded from the mouth. I don't want to take you into all details where there is a description of all the names, but some of the names I might be uttering. So the backside knob is always called as cascable, and the handles, the short handles that you see in the middle of the cannon,
क्यों?
they are referred as
कैसे
trunnions.
बनाने का उसको?
So this is how the muzzle loading cannon always worked. So you practically ram the gunpowder
तुम लोग नहीं
from the
बनाते थे?
mouth and you really press it hard with some stick or some special device in the
अच्छा
rear
है
end,
सब.
and then you put a shot. And usually with smooth bore cannons there are circular shots. So once it is packed, then you can light that gun through a vent hole. Sometimes you would see a wick, and sometimes you may find even gunpowder filled right up to the top, uh,
मेहमान
top
मेहमान
of
आएंगे तो अच्छा है
vent
ना.
portion. So sometimes you just light that wick, or sometimes you just put a hot iron rod close to the vent hole that would lead to the explosion of gunpowder. And this whole hard mass of gunpowder would immediately turn into gases, and with of course bigger volume.
दो
And so there will be big expansion
लेके जाओ.
inside a small
देखता हूँ बहुत
chamber.
कुछ.
And you would also need some exercise to set in how the gun would be fired. So usually you would require at least 4 people in order to operate a simple smooth bore muzzle loading gun. Again, there's a term called smooth bore. So the bore or the barrel inside the gun would be smooth initially, and later on they introduced rifle bore guns. So initially it was smooth, and then you would need at least 2 people to move it, 2 people to load or clean the gun, and again there would be one person who would lead the gunpowder, and of course a commander in charge who will give orders. So that kind of drill was set by the Europeans all over the world. But of course, the story does not start with the Europeans. The story of gunpowder starts with the Chinese, and very interestingly, the Chinese emperor was looking for a substance which will give humans immortality. And he had deputed a number of alchemists who were experimenting with several substances, and they found this combustion of saltpeter charcoal that would and saltpeter charcoal, and I think
Sulfur.
yeah, sulfur. Thank you. So this combustion was highly explosive, and this is actually irony that they were looking for substance of immortality, and they found the most destructive substance which took millions and millions of human life in the later history. So nevertheless, the story started with jam packing this gunpowder at rear end of short bamboo, and then they would put a projectile, and it was kind of a use and throw kind of gun in the initial days. But one can see exact copy of the bamboo stick or the bamboo piece when that technology got transferred into metal. So what you see on screen is a metal piece, but exactly copied from a piece of bamboo, and that is how the initial cannons came into vogue. Later on, they took many forms. The bigger guns. You can also see some of the projectiles of multiple arrows, like rocket launchers. And slowly, through Mongolia, this technology dispersed towards Turkey and then towards Europe. And again, from Turkey, it came to western coast of India. Again, Europeans also brought it, and Mongols were also responsible for infiltrating this technology in northern India. An alternative route through the eastern side is also suggested through Myanmar, through Assam, and again probably the cannons and gunpowder was also coming through ships from China to the coastline of India. Evidence is again seen in form of some of the fragments imported from outside on the western coast. And I was also posted in Assam for a brief. And during that time, I came across some literature which also pinpoints that gunpowder actually originated in Assam, and the technology got transferred to China, and that is how it diffused. But it's hard to believe at the moment in absence of evidence. But definitely, Eastern margins were also important from the perspective of understanding gun technology in India. So, this is our popular belief that Babur was responsible for bringing guns in India. That is what is being taught in textbooks. That is what we still believe. But if you look at this map again, uh, Babur was not really the first one to use cannons. If you look at historical records, the evidences of fight between Bahmani Empire and Vijayanagar, wherein Bahmanis had used guns extensively. Even there are references of import of guns in Vijayanagar Empire, and these evidences are much prior to the Battle of Panipat.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I would also talk about one Portuguese record when we speak about cannons from Western Coast. And there are also a lot of references of seizing gunpowder and cannons from the smaller tribes by the Ohoms. And again, these all evidences are prior to the Battle of Panipat, at least 15 to 20 years before Babur fought the Battle of Panipat. So definitely, gunpowder technology was being profusely used in Deccan, in southern India, in eastern India. But probably the Babur was the first one to use it in tactical battlefield in effective manner against Lodhis. That is how he could beat Lodhi army, which was more than 1 lakh foot soldiers against, I think Babur had only 16 to 18,000 soldiers. But tactical application of artillery was probably seen for the first time. That is why you hear much about Babur, about introduction of artillery. But well, let's try to understand how these cannons are manufactured. So, whatever we see in most of the cases, they are either cast bronze guns or cast iron cannons. In Bombay, whatever we documented were all cast iron guns. So, you can see there's a typical mold which is probably created after putting mold on the wooden carvings, and in negative impression, the molten metal is poured. In the initial phase of casting, it was easier to melt something like brass or uh, uh, the bronze, because you require the low firing point between 700 to 800 degrees in order to make bronze cannon. But when you look at iron, you require much more higher temperature between 1400 and 1500 degrees Celsius. So then there were technological advancements where you could build more effective furnaces, and then you could actually come up with cast iron guns. But before introduction of cast iron guns, they already started using iron for guns in different form. So they use horizontal metal staves of iron to form a barrel in the middle, and then they put rings above it, and this was all attached together with forged welding technology. So in Maharashtra, you get to see these type of cannon on n number of forts. So they're popularly known as Bangdicha Tofa, and you get to see them on many forts. But of course, due to technological advancement, this was already discarded by British when they set their foot on Bombay. And the last segment of typology of cannons is composite guns. Very interestingly, the barrel of the cannon in composite gun is formed of uh, iron, forge welded iron, and on the outer side you will have a casing of bronze. So that is how composite guns would be formed. So now again I'll take you to one interesting evidence of Portuguese when they captured Bijapur, the Goa from Bijapur Sultanate. Uh, they wrote back to the emperor that Bijapur people are good with casting technology of cannons, and maybe emperor can utilize these people in order to enhance our own pieces of artillery. So they dispatched two master craftsmen from Goa to Portugal, and again this reference is dated back to 1499. So again, we know for sure that Portuguese were using artillery against Bijapuris, who were well versed with the art and craft of casting the guns, and they had inherited this from Bahmanis. Though at the moment we can't pinpoint any archaeological piece dated back to Bahmani period, but there are references uh, for engagement of Firangis for manufacturing and operating the cannons during Bahmani regime. So again, these are few evidences from churches of Goa where Portuguese are shown using artillery. Let us turn back our attention to some of the Portuguese colonies on the western coast of India, that is Revdanda Fort. And again, you see n number of cast iron guns and cannonballs lying all over the place. The similar evidence of Portuguese cannons comes from Kolai Fort of Maharashtra, again on the western coast of India. Again, Janjira is a huge repository of guns with many typologies, but today we'll skip this part. But one can see there's a lot of presence of European artillery on Janjira, and many of the cannons were supplied by the Portuguese and British. There's a similar evidence from Padmadurga Fort of Maharashtra. Please try to see these cascables or the backsides of the cannons, which are typically of European origin. Then again, I would take a quick tour of some of the forts which were held by the Marathas for quite long time. Rasagad or the famous Sinhagad, none of which gives you any evidence of locally crafted cannons. There was very limited local manufacturing, and there is very little survival of that kind of evidence. Again, cannons from Sinhagad are of typical British origin. A quick tour to Daulatabad Fort, where you have huge, many cannons, about 270. This is an example of typical cast bronze gun. This is a wrought iron cannon, as I explained few minutes back. This is how it would look like from the interiors, where the barrel is composed of horizontal stars, and on outside you have circular rings. Now try to see the difference. This is again from Daulatabad Fort, but now you have cannons with typical moldings, and where the bridge is thicker, and again in toward muzzle it gets narrower. Again, these are some of the typical examples of European cannons. The import of Netherlands. So there were many European powers which were operating on the western coast of India. These are few famous cannons which were procured during the regime of Aurangzeb, and this is how a hand cannon would be fired. And now there is a shift in technology. So now there's also introduction of breech loaders towards the end of 17th century. Well, now the gunpowder was not loaded from the front, but there was a box at the back from which you can actually push gunpowder chamber, and but you load the shot from the front. So this is kind of technological evolution which was seen towards the end of 17th century. Another close view of breech loading cannon from Ausa. Now, how all the cannons that we have seen are different from British cannons. It is pretty interesting to see that the standardization of Royal Army had taken place way back in 1793, and this also percolated on the army raised by the East India Company. So often these English guns are referred as pounders. So usually that refers to the weight of the shot, which is, or the cannonball which is shot from the cannon. So it also denotes capacity of the cannon to fire a cannonball which is of a certain weightage. So usually you will often see references to the 2 pounder gun, 3 pounder gun, or 9 pounder, and that goes on till 64 pounder guns. So one can see its reflection in kg, but often during those days, pound was commonly used. So this is the now there is some terminology. If you refer to some of the contemporary manuals, they have these abbreviations called BL, that is breech loading. So that is basically modern artillery, where the shell is loaded from the backside, and now we have a composite shell which also consists of gunpowder as well as the shot which is fired. So it's a composite form, and earlier there were two separate pieces. And whatever cannons that we are talking about are all ML or muzzle loading cannons. And again, PR is a short form of pounder. Generally, 20 PR denotes 20 pounder gun. And later on, you have introduction of QF artillery, that is quick firing artillery. Muzzle loading guns were pretty cumbersome and slow to operate. So they were considered. So the later artillery, which was breech loading artillery, was referred as QF artillery. So let us see what we have got in Bombay so far. So I mean, you're mostly familiar with the history of Bombay, so I will not go much into the details. But if you refer the dynasties, like right from the Mauryas of Konkan, then Chalukyas, or even up to Yadav period, or even during the rule of King Bimber, you don't see the mention of gunpowder in any of the literature. And cannons is definitely later introduction. And then you have a phase where Bombay was also ruled by sultans of Gujarat. Sultans of Gujarat were also responsible for introduction of artillery on the western coast of India, but you don't get to see any pieces of ordnance in Bombay used by them. So at present, we presume that Portuguese were the first one to introduce artillery in Bombay. So you have references of 1554 of construction of manor house, and in 1626 you have evidences of construction of fortifications and introduction of two guns on the bastions. So this is very important, and now we know for sure that the famous treaty of 1661, which was a marriage between Prince Charles and Catherine Braganza, uh, due to which this island was transferred from Portuguese to British, and then British Crown handed it over to East India Company. Then you see rigorous construction activity in form of Bombay Castle, and of course this castle was again deployed with many cannons. And when this construction was completed, you could see five gates, that is Apollo Gate, close to our Gateway of India, then Church Gate, Bazaar Gate, and there were two Marine Lines gates. So, and unfortunately, this whole construction got dismantled in during 1862 to 67, and that is how we lost all this great fortification to Bombay. And I think when they were dismantling this fort, they just threw away many of the muzzle loading cannons. So, as you can see, there's a concentration of cannons in Mantralaya. So, that is mostly found when reclamation work was being done. And again, I'll come to a smaller entity that you see on top or towards north, that is Fort George, which was a later addition, and this probably served as a magazine for storing gunpowder chamber. At present, this is also my office, so I was really happy to know this particular connection of function of Fort George and Bombay Castle. But well, now let's look at why we started this project. Even though Bombay Castle was systematically dismantled, these pieces of ordnance were left behind, and they were prone to vandalism, human vandalism, and natural hazard. And I think they are quite important pieces of archaeological record to reconstruct military history of Mumbai, where you see a clear change in application of firepower while protecting your coast, and then there is a technological transformation which is also seen prior little to World War I in and around Bombay. That is also very well reflected in the kind of ordnance pieces that you still find. And some of them they got converted into bollards, some of them are now used as trophies, and sadly some of them are also object of worship. So I think we need to respect our history, and especially military history, which has practically shaped geopolitics of this particular region. So I think they deserve the respect and due place in the history. And if we don't safeguard them, it will be a lost memory actually. So our documentation was mostly focused in South Bombay plus Elephanta. So we have a cannon in Directorate which was transported from Metro Cinema, road construction. Then a cannon was found across Taj Mahal Hotel while construction of the road. We noticed two cannons in Reynolds Colony, Wadala, and that is how this whole project was accelerated. And there are two cannons lying down in Maidan in total neglect. Two at Gateway of India, we documented two cannons from Elephanta. Three totally lost cannons at Karnak Bandar. You will see how we have practically lost them. Luckily, Prince of Wales CSMVS Museum has stored few cannons in good shape. Uh, they have been properly taken care of. They are provided with proper carriages, and chemical conservation work is also has been carried out. Then there is a concentration of about 10 cannons in Mantralaya. So this is the physical distribution that has been reported so far. And after we started this work, many people started reporting cannons from Mumbai and surroundings. There are a few cannons reported in Parel, which are stuck deep into road construction activity. So this is just a glimpse of the documentation exercise that we carried on. So why this is important? Because you will see a standardization of Bordaya in European canons. So, in another words, if you look at the cannons which were manufactured by the local rulers, the borehole dia was not standardized. First, they made cannon, and then they started making cannonballs or shots accordingly. But in British cannons, you will see this standardization of caliber, so that also ensures mass production of gunshots or cannonballs. So this is the cannon at our office, Fort George, inside St. George Hospital. So the borehole dia is 9 centimeter and it is about 2 meters long. This is the kind of cross section we did with our drawings. So this is the scientific method of documenting a cannon. Then this is cannon found in accidental diggings across Taj. Now this is lifted by BMC. We requested them to hand it over to Directorate of Archaeology, but they have their own plans to place it somewhere as a decorative trophy. And these are two cannons from Wadala, Reynolds colony. Again, these are cast iron guns. You can see all typical characteristics of any European gun here. So they're quite long, about 3 meters, and borehole die is also slightly larger, which is about 15 centimeters. We requested Port Trust authorities, but they have ensured us that they will place it on proper carriage and they will do conservation according to our norms of preservation. Again, a sad state of cannons inside Cross Maidan. I think Cross Maidan is quite centrally located, and hardly any one of us we know that there are two cannons in corner of that ground, and these are again pretty interesting because probably they were deployed on ships and then later they are transported on the land. So this is another cannon from Cross Maidan, again 1.75 meters long. I think all of us uh, have seen Gateway of India so many times, but many of us may have failed to notice those cannons installed upside down in two bastions towards the sea. So practically they are used to tie ropes of the boats. So they are practically functioning as bollards, and of course they are not really treated nicely by the people. You can see all spitting of pan and all around this cannon. So I think putting cannon upside down and utilizing that as a bollard also gave rise to this bollard design. So the later period bollards that you see, they are not cannons, but it is imitation of breech part of the cannon. So this is also interesting from the art history point of view. A piece of firing also becomes a motif in decorative art. Now let us turn our attention to very two interesting pieces from Karnak Bandar. They're just lying on the ground besides a godown, but local community they don't allow us to shift them from that particular place. We know for sure that they are of British origin from typology, uh, but they have a modern function to perform now. So luckily, in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya or former Prince of Wales Museum, the cannons are in better shape of preservation, put on pedestal. Again, this is one interesting piece. The length is almost more than 3 meters, and now on the back side you will see instead of knob there is a ring attached to the backside of the cascable, and you need this kind of ring to pass on rope through cannon, so that cannon could be tied to its carriage. And this was a simple means to arrest the backfire of cannon. And if this cannon is loaded on ship, the if recoil goes to a greater length, it may strike back the people, or it may damage even the other side of the ship. So there's a limited space in ship, so you need to restrict movement of that acceleration of backfire of the cannon. So that's why you need ropes while operating cannons. There's another piece from CSMVS where you see a small ring kind of feature. Now, when I documented all the cannons from Mantralaya, many people thought that we are taking measurements in order to discard them in scrap. So usually, if you auction such pieces, it has to be by weight. So they thought that we are doing some process of auctioning them.
अब वो घाट गोबर में जो वो एक तोप पड़ी है हाँ वो हमने
But
हमने बार बात कर रहा
luck-
हूँ कितनी पुरानी है था 200 साल पुरानी है वो हाँ वही
but luckily they are in better shape of preservation, and I'm sure they are found all over the western side of old Bombay Castle when they were doing reclamation. Those cannons might have found in place of where once existed famous Maratha ditch. I mean, after British won entire Indian subcontinent, and even when they achieved victory on French in Europe, the fortifications were not really necessary. So when they dismantled Bombay Castle, they also fill up that famous Maratha ditch, and some of the cannons might have been thrown into that Maratha ditch. I was actually hoping to see some Portuguese emblems on few of the cannons, but unfortunately, the emblems are so eroded that it's difficult to make out the origin. Usually, with these royal emblems, one can understand during whose reign that cannon got manufactured, but not. Of course, this is a British gun where a motif is very clearly seen, but in case of other guns, it's really difficult to make out. And on some cannons, you see year of manufacturing, that is 1790, and you also see numbers engraved on the back. This engraving is done after manufacturing. So usually that really denotes the weight of the cannon and the gunpowder which needs to be filled in, and again weight of the cannonball. So this is kind of ready-made formula given to gunner. Suppose gun is handed over from one gunner to another, there should be a ready-made formula across. So that was engraved right on the gun itself. There's another cannon from Mantralaya, and again now you'll be able to make out that probably this was deployed on ship at one point of time. So this is what I was talking about when you fit this gun on ship. So in order to absorb that recoil, you tie that rope, and that rope goes through that ring which is attached in the backside of cascable. Again, royal emblem. In 2018, uh, when they were doing some restoration work of bunkers or the batteries in Rajbhavan, they found these two large caliber guns, which were probably the last advancement in muzzle loading technology before they vanished from the scene. So now Rajbhavan has taken a proper care of these cannons, and they are restored on proper carriage. And then we also took into consideration guns deployed on Elephanta Island. So that everybody goes to this famous rocket caves, but nobody really bothers to go to top. There are actually two hilltops separated from each other by 1 kilometer, and you get to see deployment of these two identical cannons on top, and they're quite long, about 10 meters long, and they are essentially breech loading cannons. So here the shell is loaded from the backside, and that is kind of technological advancement that you see here. And here I think there's a clear cut emblem of period of Edward VII, who ruled between 901 to 1910. So this was introduced just before First World War uh, on Bombay scenario. And again, this is also engraved with a French maxim, which can be roughly translated as "shame to him who thinks evil of it." So you get to see this maxim at many royal British emblems. I would come to a very interesting piece of how we see cannons in modern perspective as well. So you see this temple of Jaima Tofeshwari, and initially I thought these kind of practices would be somewhere in the remote areas of Maharashtra. This example comes from Vidarbha, and I forgot to mention that this is taken from Facebook publication of Saili Palande. So I would like to acknowledge her for this. And I never thought that I may come across similar situation in advanced city like Bombay. But here we are. The cannon at Karnak Bandar is placed upside down, and the place is turned into a shrine, and that is studied, that is worshipped as Vetal by the locals.
Canon being worshipped as
Yeah,
a deity in
yes.
Bombay.
So they offer several things, and you can see the canon being worshipped right in the heart of the Bombay. But again, there is very interesting evidence which comes from Saint Thomas Cathedral, which is also 0 mile of Bombay. We usually look at literary references. When I was going through some English factory records, which talks about construction of Bombay Castle. So the governor, the resident of Bombay writes back to Surat that you need to give me a proper architect who can come up with a proper plan. And the governor in Surat he finds that placing a separate dedicated architect would be too expensive, and it is difficult to manage attitude of architects. So better you work with some military engineer who is disposed with you and save some money. So these are some of the interesting conversations that you see in Bombay Factory Record. The Bombay resident demands more and more gunpowder. The allotment is not enough. Marathas are attacking quite often, so we have to fire some warning gunshots, some precautionary gunshots. So we need more and more gunpowder. And then there is some secret correspondence by some junior that all these demands are fake. There are not too many firings, so this is kind of a light on corruption of East India Company. But I'm just looking at items which are related to gunpowder and construction of fortifications. But besides archaeological evidences in form of these actual cannons and the written records, we also have reflection of cannons in art. So this is beautiful memorial of Admiral Maitland, raised in 1839, where you see cannons on your left hand side. You will see muzzle jutting out, and some of the cascable portions are shown. So these cascables can be easily related to the guns that you find on field. And again, very interestingly, they also show cannonballs. So some of the cannonballs are made out of solid stone, but the piece that you're seeing here has a hole. So this is a hollow cannonball. So after casting it, you can actually feel gunpowder inside this, and the gunpowder filled cannonball of iron could be shot from the cannons. So that is the kind of technological advancements that Europeans had with their guns, and many of the local powers, they continued to use solid stone balls even while they were fighting with the Britishers. Of course, Marathas made great advancements of artillery under Scindias. Tipu also greatly revolutionized his artillery, and few of the Holkar and Scindia artillery, and even artillery created by Sikhs under Ranjit Singh, was at par with the Europeans. But again, one can see there was a great technological differences where Britishers commanded superiority, and the result of Battle of Plassey was quite evident. So this is another memorial of Major Alexander Pate, where besides cannon, it also shows lot of devices like ladle, or spatula, or even the scraper, or the sponge with stick. These are all equipments which are required by a gunner in order to operate that cannon smoothly. So all they are also depicted on the memorial of Major Alexander. So one can easily understand the emotional connect with these pieces of ordnance, and even the subsidiary elements like items of cleaning and maintaining the cannons. So I think this was all there, and for some reason we failed to see it. So I think this is just beginning, and so we need to take it forward. As I mentioned earlier, these cannons are in premises of several government organizations. Let us start with Navy. The area which Navy has got, they have many muzzle loading cannons, and they also found few cannons in recent diggings. I think they have installed it on some pedestal, but I think still we need to document all of them, and we need to bring them in public domain in form of published records. That is totally missing from the scene. Second government organization is Port Trust Authority, uh, who have a lot of muzzle loading guns in their area. Some of them are stored as per the original, and there is still a scope of bringing these guns in knowledge of public, because only the restoration and placement on carriages will not be enough, but publication are quite important. And then our Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, you have many guns around. As you can see, they are now documented there in published domains. So we need to make a comprehensive documentation and combine it further in a working model where we can offer some kind of preservation solution to all these bodies. And similarly, this can go in our published record, which will be used by scholars, which will be used by future generations in order to understand our military past. And even in small area like Bombay, how one can show that archaeological record was so important that it could relink our military history with documentary evidences of factory records and what is reflected in murals at St. Thomas Church. So thank you so much for listening to me patiently.